Hi, I'm Ardith, and you probably already know that I love Catherine Pooler inks. They're a one-stop ink. They stamp really well because they give full coverage first time every time. And they blend really well. Plus, they're water reactive, so you can do all kinds of techniques. And they come in 60 different colors. But not for long. That's right, there's 8 new colors coming. I can't wait for these new inks to arrive, but it does cause me a little organizational problem. In the past, I swatched my inks on business card-sized pieces of white cardstock. I've seen a lot of people use this system or a variation of it with those 2x2-inch coin pockets, and it has a lot of good points. You can pull out the pieces to allow for flexibility when new inks come out, or to group them together to test out different color combinations. But I found it a bit cumbersome, especially when I needed to add one ink in the middle of my rainbow. Everything else had to move. Also, it was just out of reach, so I rarely referred to it, and I think that meant that quite a few of the colors didn't get used very often. Early in 2020, I took inspiration from Sandy Allnock's hex charts, and I switched over to a one-sheet system of squares. I blended the ink into each square, and I labeled it with a color name and my best approximation of a Copic marker match. I used this one a lot, but even when I made it, I knew it was a temporary solution. It had a little room to grow, and you can see that when the latest Luxe Christmas colors came out last fall, there was room for them, but not in the right order. And now there's no room for the 8 new colors coming next week. And then I saw this, and I love the idea of using magnets that could move around and be put in any order. And the more I thought about it, the better it seemed. I can easily insert new colors, I can resort by color families or by full rainbow, and I can pull a few out to see how they combine with other colors. There's a ton of ways to do this, and I'll talk a bit about easy and inexpensive alternatives after I show you what I decided on. First, the magnets themselves. I figured that shape and size would be important. I want the color swatches to each be big enough to get a good look at the color, to have the name and Copic information on it, but I also want them small enough that it's not a huge piece when they're all together. I chose these magnet squares just over 1 inch each, nice and thick and sturdy. They're already cut, and that's nice, except that they're cut to 1.2 inches. Who measures inches in tenths? This made it a little tricky in my next step, and I'll show you what I mean in a second. These magnets also have adhesive on one side, which saves me a step, and overall I'm quite happy with them. I got them on Amazon.ca, and I'll link them below. Now for the labels, I used the same cardstock that I usually use for my card making. This means that the colors will look the same on my cards as they do on my swatches. I trimmed them down into squares, and this is where that 1.2-inch issue came back. I see now that they're exactly 3 centimeters, and I could have just converted and made my life a lot easier, but I didn't think of it at the time. I just did my best, and I cut my cardstock into 1 3/16-inch strips, which is 1.18 inches, and then I trimmed the strips into squares. I put them in piles of 10 as I created them to help me keep track, and I cut 80 of them in total. To add color, I used the grid on my Misty mouse pad and some 1/2-inch purple tape to mask off a 1/4 inch along one edge for the color information. I've had trouble with purple tape sticking to my cardstock in the past, so I had a microfiber cloth nearby to help me remove some of the sticky. Using a grid means there's no measuring. You just line up the square on the grid and then put the tape along the next grid line. Then I just grabbed an ink pad and I blended it onto the exposed portion, and I referred to my old swatch sheet for the Copic color. I've put a list of my best Copic matches on my blog, and I'll link to that below. Then I grabbed a magnet, removed the release paper, and stuck the color down on it. And then I did it 58 more times. I didn't bother swatching midnight. Black is black, right? The next step was to find a magnetic surface to display it on. My first thought was a whiteboard, which my daughter has. I like that it has a white background and it's very portable, although obviously it's quite a bit heavier than my swatch sheet or even that business card holder. I'm thinking about getting a larger whiteboard on my wall so that I can put the swatches there and pull down the ones I want, or just see them all at a glance. Now let's talk about some alternatives. For the squares, you don't have to use magnets at all. You could just laminate cardstock, maybe punch a hole and use a binder ring to hold them. You could use sticky tack or Velcro dots on the back so that they could stay in place on a display board. Or you could use magnet sheets. That way you choose your size and even the shape of your swatches. They would be lighter than the magnets I used here, but I was worried about durability as those sheets can be quite flimsy, and I want these to last. For the information, instead of masking, you could create little labels and stick them on top of a fully inked square. Or you could print your squares with the names and whatever information you want on them. For the display portion, I thought about things that we might already have on hand. I tried using my larger Make Art station. I also have the smaller one, and it's the one I use the most, and this has a grid on it which appeals to my orderly side and makes it easy to line them up. And hey, if you're like me and you bought the new Misty, what about using your old one? You can remove the lid or keep it on to protect your swatches. It'll only fit about 40 of them, but if you have a smaller collection, this could work for you. I also wondered about one of those mini cookie sheets that people have used for things like advent calendars. You can get a cheap one at a dollar store. Just make sure it's not aluminum or your magnets won't stick. There's lots of alternatives available. The important thing is to find out what works for you. So bring on January 13th. I can't wait to add these 8 new colors to my collection and start playing with them. I'll be back at the end of the month with another video where I swatch the new inks and I show a few new projects. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.